I got 5 players you should trade for, 5 players you should trade away, and 5 waiver wire targets. This is buy, sell, and waivers. Last week, we hit our goal of 1,000 subscribers, so we are setting a new goal to get to 1.5K by the end of the year. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. First guy that we're going to talk about here as a buy low is Quinshon Judkins. So this is about as obvious of a buy as you can get. He's coming off a 12 carry, 36-yard game where he did not get a reception. So you see here in the snap share too, Jerome Ford played as many snaps as him, had more snaps than him, had more routes run than him, had 5 targets. And Dylan Sampson was even more involved than he had been in past weeks. Got 3 carries, had a couple catches as well. So if somebody's worried a little bit about the role, a little bit about the production, thinks maybe he was playing over his head the last 2 weeks, and this is maybe a little bit more indicative of where he's going to be at, I would be all over that. I still think that Quinshon Judkins is going to be an easy top 20 running back the rest of the season with clear top 12 potential. This was just a weird game overall. You know, Dylan Gabriel, 52 attempts and only threw for like 200 yards and they didn't have a score. I don't think that this is going to be how these games go very frequently. So I do think Quinshon Judkins is definitely somebody that you want to be buying low if the manager that has him is worried. So if you have Breece Hall, who we'll talk about here in a second, who is also going to be a buy, and you can add something off your bench to go up and get Judkins, I think I would do that. Any of the guys between 15 and 20 at this point too, I would definitely be trying to turn into Quinshon Judkins. Anybody like Jaylen Warren, David Montgomery, or Alvin Kamara, anybody like that, go up, send out some offers. You know, if you have a wide receiver on your bench and you're doing well with injuries at that position, which is kind of hard to imagine, just go and throw out some offers at Judkins this week. Not somebody I would really be looking to trade back into, like where I would take a second player with him, just because I think he's good enough where I'm not entirely sure what that would look like. If you could do it with Javonte Williams coming off a bad game, I would still consider doing that, getting something in addition to Judkins for Javonte Williams. But other than that, you're looking at very, very good players ahead of Judkins. So, you know, I don't know that I'd be looking to trade off of any of those top end running backs. And I just talked about him a second ago, but the next guy up is Breece Hall. So he had 22 carries for only 59 yards and no receptions in this game against the Broncos. I mean, Justin Fields was absolutely brutal in this game. He threw for 45 yards. He had as many completions as he did sacks, 9 for 17. They didn't get anything going on offense at all. And so the Broncos have an excellent defense. They know what they're doing. They were able to just stack the box against Breece. He wasn't able to get anything going. They had enough help on the outside. Garrett Wilson got banged up in this game too. So there was just nothing on offense for the Jets. But they're not going to be playing the Broncos every week, right? And Breece Hall should still continue to get featured. He still should get involved in the passing game. And you see here that he still absolutely dominated the snap share. It wasn't like Isaiah Davis started coming in and looked better than him or anything like that. Still 43 snaps to 15, still ran more routes. And then obviously the 22 carries is still an excellent workload. So Breece Hall, definitely somebody that you should continue trying to buy. I've been kind of beating the drum on buying Breece Hall, even through these bad games. I mean, you go and look at his player card. He's not playing super well in terms of fantasy production. So he's got a couple solid games, but he's got 3 really bad games in there. So if you can buy him, I'd still definitely be buying him as, you know, a top 13 to 15 running back. Another guy that I would try and go up and get with some of those guys that I mentioned earlier. Next guy up, we're going to go over to wide receiver is Courtland Sutton. I feel like he shows up every single time he has a bad game. But again, that was just a weird game with the Broncos and the Jets, and Courtland Sutton went up against Sauce Gardner. So it's kind of expected that he was going to get shut down a little bit, even though 1 for 17 is a little bit difficult to stomach if you did start him this past week. But I do think better days are ahead, right? For the Broncos offense as a whole, even as much as we don't like Bo Nix, I don't think Matt or I anticipated he was going to be this bad so far this year. But with Sutton, he's had some good games in between his 2 one-catch games. So, you know, last week it was 8 for 99 and a touchdown. And I think that there's a lot more games like that coming in the future. So not somebody that I'd give up a ton for, but if you can trade for him in that, you know, 20 wide receiver 25 type of range, there's just been so many injuries at the position that it feels like he's still a relatively stable option despite the 2 stinkers in the last 3 weeks. So if you can use another foreshadowing here, Wan'Dale Robinson plus a running back, you know, a bench running back of some sort to go up and get Courtland Sutton, I would definitely be looking to do that, you know, and whoever has Cortland Sutton, there's a chance that they're going to be very willing to trade him off of 2 or 3 bad games. Get out there with your league mate and really try and see if Cortland Sutton is somebody that you can add to your roster this week. Next guy I'm going to suggest to buy low on is definitely risky, but it's T. Higgins. So I don't know that anybody could have had a worse start to the year. Obviously, Burrow getting hurt kind of made that happen, but he's been completely unplayable. I mean, until this week when they traded for Joe Flacco, it was still even up in the air whether or not Flacco was going to make this offense look much better. But as you can see, he did, right? 12 targets for Jamar Chase, 8 targets for T. Higgins. He only had 5 for 62. So there's a chance that the owner is still a little bit on tilt that has T. Higgins, but they didn't turn the ball over and the offense looked significantly better. They were playing Green Bay, which is a really difficult defense on top of that. Higgins almost had a touchdown in this game too, so that would have made it so it would be really difficult to trade for him. But overall, Flacco's going to get better and better as he learns the playbook. They can kind of open up the offense a little bit. And these two are going to be the focal point of what Flacco can do here. We've seen him in the last couple of years really elevate wide receiver play. And even behind this terrible offensive line, I still think that better days are ahead for T. Higgins. So if the owner that has him just is out and you can kind of get him for, again, a couple of bench guys or, a couple of the guys that you've been considering for flex every week, that type of thing, I would definitely throw some offers at T. Higgins. Not a guy I'd be trading back into. I'm not looking to trade off of somebody that's a top 15 to 20 wide receiver to, trade in for T. Higgins and another depth piece. I would not be looking to do that at all. This is somebody that I consider as still a wide receiver 3 at this point. So it's somebody that I'd be using, multiple. If I'm deep on my bench and I can consolidate 2 players into one, that's all I'd be looking to do for T. Higgins. That's coming from somebody that has T. Higgins in a league. I don't know that I would trade him in some situation like that, but I'd be, even as the T. Higgins owner, if I get a comparable receiver with another player in my rosters, then I would definitely be doing that, depending on the player, right? If you can get a solid running back like a David Montgomery plus a decent wide receiver like a Wan'Dale Robinson or somebody like that, I think you have to consider that if your bench is thin and you're looking for additional starters at this point in the season, especially if you're 2 and 4, which if you have Higgins, there's a pretty good chance that you are under 500. So Higgins, somebody here that I think could show up on a lot of most traded lists this week, just because, there's a change in situation here. And I think players are going to think he has some value and the players that own T. Higgins want off him. So hopefully there is the potential for you guys to get out there and trade for Higgins or trade Higgins away, even in a situation where you get a good deal. The next guy up is a buy high. So, these are always tricky because how high do you buy? But Jaylen Waddle is that player. This is exactly why I was hoping or thinking that the Dolphins would be okay trading away Tyreek Hill in the offseason. Because all that drama, then he wasn't a captain. And it just obviously him getting hurt with that horrific injury was terrible. He was actually playing really well, but this version of the offense is kind of what I was hoping for if they did move off of Tyreek Hill, and that would make Jaylen Waddle a top 15 wide receiver, right back kind of where we knew he could be if Tyreek Hill was out of the way and he could be the featured receiver in the offense, which has happened now over the last 2 weeks. He's been phenomenal, right? I mean, obviously he got loose last week for that 40+ yard touchdown. And then this week, though, he backs it up again with 6 for 95 on 8 targets. He didn't even blow up the stat sheet in terms of targets. Tua was absolutely brutal in this one. He threw 3 picks, although one of them was Jaylen Waddle's fault. I mean, he kind of just scooped it right to the safety. Overall, I think Waddle is somebody that's going to be just rock solid starter in all league formats, regardless of his PPR or standard 3 wide receiver, 2 wide receiver, 2 flex, 1 flex, doesn't matter. He's going to be a locked in starter for whoever has him for the rest of the season. So if you can trade for somebody like that, I really think it's worth it. Like we talked about Cortland Sutton earlier. This is somebody that I would use Sutton to move up into. I think Waddle is going to be better than Sutton the rest of the year. Maybe it's super unpopular to talk about George Pickens, somebody that'll show up on a screenshot here in a little bit. If you can trade George Pickens and get Waddle plus, that's something too that I think is potentially smart with CeeDee Lamb returning. I just don't think that George Pickens' volume is going to stay the same here. So Obviously, Pickens is a great player as well, but that's just something where I think, again, if your roster is struggling and you drafted Pickens late, and you have 2 or 3 injuries, you can get a legitimate starter. Maybe you can get Waddle and Swift coming off a monster game on Monday night or something like that to bolster your roster overall. The Pickens owners probably listen to this like, yeah, right, I'm not taking Swift and Waddle for Pickens, but I think you get what I'm saying here, right? That Waddle is somebody that I think is just going to be an established starter, and I really, really think over the rest of the year that he's going to turn in a wide receiver 15 or better finish. And as promised, there's George Pickens at the top, but that's not the player we're going to be talking about as a sell high. The sell high here is Jake Ferguson. So he had 3 for 33 and a touchdown on only 3 targets this week. He had a monster target share the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, ever since CeeDee Lamb went down. You see George Pickens was a huge target hog in this game, but also it's CeeDee Lamb is likely to come back in week 7. And if it's not week 7, it's going to be week 8. So, with Lamb on the mend, it's just really hard for me to trust either one of these two. And Jake Ferguson is somebody that is like tight end 1 right now, right? Or tight end 2. He's right at the top there. So with Bowers banged up and McBride obviously playing well, but Kittle's been out too, Ferguson has been a great replacement. And so if somebody is struggling at tight end, especially in your 12-team leagues, and you have somebody else on your bench, or you're the George Kittle owner, looks like he might be returning this week, and you added Ferguson after week 1, definitely look to get off of him for a flex option would be what I would say. I mean, obviously it's hard to trade somebody like Ferguson who has been starting for you consistently and would start for whoever you trade him to for a flex guy. But I think it's worth it. Bye weeks, injuries, you never know what exactly you're going to need. And so somebody that is a legitimate starting option is somebody that I would be looking to get for Ferguson. So, without knowing your rosters, it's hard, but in that Alvin Kamara range, maybe try and throw it out if, for him at running back, maybe David Montgomery, maybe, there's a bunch of guys, J.K. Dobbins coming off a bad game, somebody in that area that you could potentially add a receiver to or something like that with Ferguson. Or even a lower end running back. Maybe you've got a longer term piece like an RJ Harvey or something like that, and you could add them to Jake Ferguson to move up into one of those running backs. So I think if you need running back help, that's a decent move there. And it's hard to trade a tight end too, because some leagues tight ends just aren't worth anything, and some leagues they're super valuable because 20 of them get owned. So it's a hard position to try and talk trade for. Just make sure you're getting somebody in that starting range. So in 3 wide receiver leagues, if you're getting a top 36 type of top 30 wide receiver, like in that range, and they'll do it for Ferguson straight up, and you have somebody on your bench, or they're starting somebody like Hunter Henry, and they'll include Hunter Henry, so you have somebody to play. I'd be looking at trades like that, just trying to see what sort of value you can get for him, because this is as high as I think he's going to be all year, coming off of all of these targets and receptions. Like he's not going to be up there anymore because he only had 3 this week, but he was second in the league in receptions coming into this week. He had a huge role, and anybody that's paying attention knows that he's been solid, and that Dallas's offense is going to be really difficult for any team to stop. So you basically have to score with Dallas. Dallas's defense is horrible, so even throughout the rest of the year, Ferguson should be good. It's just one of those things where if you can get value for somebody that I don't know is going to continue to play as well as he has, I think that's something that you need to do. Next guy up is our favorite player to talk about on this episode is Kenneth Walker. So haven't talked about him in a couple weeks, and it's kind of because it's just been ho-hum and boring and more of the same. But I'm going to list him as a sell low here this week. When Charbonnet is on the field, Walker is not playable, really. If anybody thinks that he's still super good, or anybody thinks that they want to add him to their bench in case Charbonnet gets hurt or anything like that, I think you should be looking to deal him as for anything you can get, really. I mean, he's not somebody that I would be considering putting in my lineup. I don't really have him anywhere, so maybe that drives my opinion a little bit too. But overall, I think Walker is somebody that has all the talent in the world, but when he's only going to play 19 snaps and only get 10 carries, if he doesn't blow up on one of those, even if he has a good average, it's 60 yards maybe, and 1 target. So it's just not a role that is conducive to fantasy success. It's something that is parked on your bench consistently. I've been seeing him still get projected in that 11 range on Sleeper, and I just roll my eyes so hard every time I see it, because it's like, unless he scores, unless he has a long touchdown, which he can do, that's not going to be even close. This is somebody that should be ranked, or that should get a 8.5 type of projection. That's very touchdown dependent at this point, and doesn't even have the goal line work. So, Charbonnet comes in when they're inside the 10-yard line. So he's got to score from distance to be any good. And without a Charbonnet injury, like, I just don't see it for Ken Walker this year, unfortunately. So again, I hate to say for anything you can get, because he is talented still. Don't just give him away, but if you can use him as a kicker in a deal to like kind of get something done, maybe you're trying to move into Stephon Diggs, who's coming off a bad game, and somebody's reluctant, but you have Walker and you can add him as the second player. Doing something like that, I think, is worth it if you need wide receiver help, or if you're looking to move up or upgrade a wide receiver position. Next guy to sell showed up last week as well, and that's Tony Pollard. I want to hammer the point home this week, because you have to get out now or you're not going to be able to. He had 10 carries, doubled up Tajay Spears' carries, but Spears looked significantly better. He played way more snaps, 10 more snaps, and he ran way more routes. He doubled him on routes run. So Spears not only was playing on early downs, he also played all of the passing down work. This is a bad team that we don't think is really going to be winning games hardly at all. And so Spears is going to be just on the field so much more than Pollard. And the fact that they trust him in any sort of rushing game role already, he was a surprise active, in my opinion, last week. And this is his second game back. And I think moving forward, Spears is going to be the one that you straight up want in this backfield between the two of them. And we'll talk about Spears a little bit more, but Pollard is somebody that you have to get off of now if you can. Another one of those type of players that if you can add him to a deal as the second player to move up somewhere, I think that's worth it. Somebody that's struggling with running back help, or that lost James Conner, has been playing that roulette with Arizona, or that lost Marion Hampton when they picked up Haskins instead of Vidal. Go and kind of talk to that owner and see if they're interested in Tony Pollard as a stopgap, at least for the next couple of weeks, and try and see what else you could get off of a team that's in that sort of situation. The next guy to sell high on is Jameson Williams. So obviously hurts my heart a little bit, because I had him very well ranked coming into the year, but unfortunately that just hasn't manifested in very much work. And we finally see him get 7 targets. Obviously turns it into a good game, right? I mean, 6 for 66 and a touchdown. This was just a weird game all the way around. I mean, they were playing the Chiefs, and their idea of success was to just run Gibbs in between the tackles constantly. And what sort of game plan yields Gibbs getting like 3.5 a carry? It was not a good game plan. And you see Amon-Ra here with 9 for 45. He was basically an extension of the running game, because they couldn't really get anything going. And by the time they started throwing more, it was too late. They just hadn't gotten anything consistently going. You see Gibbs only had 1 for 0. JMO was involved early and often, though, so that was pretty good to see. And he did score on like a 22-yarder early in the game. Overall, he's been so bad. So, now that he had a good game, you got to see what else you can get for him on the market. Go to the team that is ranked highest in your league. Whoever's 5-1 or 4-2, up at the top of your league, they'll be interested in Jameson Williams for down the stretch type of run. This is a really good offense. He should have games where he pops. And if the number one team has a solid receiver or has a deep bench, maybe you can take 2 of their bench players and consolidate into Jameson Williams, that type of thing. And try and expand the talent on your own team into a couple more players, And then obviously if you could trade him as the second piece and move up into a better player, make sure you trade really high if you're going to do that with him, I think, because this is one of the most explosive players in the league. So if he is going to get any sort of elevated target share moving forward, or the new offensive coordinator is going to make a point to try and get him involved, I could see him being good. So, you don't want to just give up entirely on him, but I do think that this is somebody that you want to go and shop around, see what you can get, see if there is interest in your league after this good game. Next guy that we're going to talk about here, somebody that I've mentioned a couple times, is Wan'Dale Robinson. So he had another good game, and you see the snap share here, 67 snaps, 32 routes, 7 targets. He turns it into 6 for 84 and a touchdown. This is like his third good game now as well. So overall, I think he's turning into a pretty solid starter in 3 wide receiver leagues. And he's the only game left in town, and Jackson Dart's playing pretty well, seems to like him. And, Lil Jordan Humphrey, I don't know that we can expect 8 targets very often from him, but he only turned that into 4 for 55. Overall, I think Wan'Dale is the pass catcher you want here. Theo Johnson had a good game 2 weeks ago, not so good this week, unfortunately. Didn't really get involved hardly at all. But Wan'Dale is somebody, too, that I just don't know if I trust him as a legitimate wide receiver or as a number one. I feel like it's a lot of scheme and uncertainty for getting him opened. I just don't necessarily know if I trust the production so far. So if you can get anything for him, I think that's kind of worth it, right? And you don't want to sell low, but if this is the type of player that I would just be trying to add to a team that's struggling with players, right? If they're not able to even field a legitimate starting lineup, they're starting to play guys like Rashid Shaheed, or you just see legitimately bad players in some of your league mates lineups. You see Ramondre and flex spots, that type of thing. Those are the teams that I'd be looking to target here and try and give Wan'Dale with somebody to get one of their better players. Maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. is out there somewhere coming off a concussion. Maybe he doesn't play this week, and you're in a position where you can trade Wan'Dale plus somebody off your bench for Marvin Harrison Jr., and somebody will go for that because they need the help in the short term. Definitely something I would be looking to do. So again, this is somebody that's on the bubble of the playoffs, right? More towards the lower part of your league that could go fishing on somebody like Wan'Dale, who's been good production-wise, and they think that they can get a couple more good weeks out of him immediately and have him be a good starter. Maybe they're waiting on a couple guys coming back from injury or something. All right, and let's get into the waiver wire targets now. So we got 5 waiver wire targets here, starting off with Kamani Vidal. So obviously there were a lot of Kamani Vidal truthers as he was coming out of college, 6th round pick for the Chargers. And I was not one of those guys. I did not think he was very good. I did not think he was going to get this role over Haskins, especially since we were told that going into the games that Haskins was going to be the lead back. And that changed almost instantly when the game started. Haskins didn't even take the first carry. Vidal was out there for the first carry, first target from running backs, and obviously didn't slow down from there. 18 carries, 124 yards. He also had 3 catches for 14 yards and a receiving touchdown. Monster game from Vidal. Monster usage, too. I mean, he was 43 snaps to Haskins 20. He ran 21 routes to Haskins 8. He had 4 targets to Haskins 1, and he had 18 carries to Haskins 6. I mean, he could not have more thoroughly dominated this backfield this week. So if Vidal did not get picked up in your league somehow, I mean, I feel like Haskins and Vidal were kind of the hottest pickups last week. So if you got lucky and got Vidal, congratulations. If you did not get Vidal and he's still out there, this is absolutely the number 1 waiver claim this week. So the Chargers have been in the news about trading for a running back and about that Hampton is going to miss more than the 4 weeks. So Hampton has a serious injury here. We don't know anything about when he's going to come back. So just make sure that you go and check for Vidal because he's absolutely the number 1 claim this week if he's still available in your leagues. Next guy that we're going to talk about is Tajay Spears. So we kind of already went over Pollard in the sell department, and I did kind of hype up Spears in terms of it being his second game. So just to reiterate here, this is somebody with an ascending role, played a ton of snaps. He's coming off an injury, so be a little bit wary about if he's going to be super good. I wouldn't go crazy on Fab if he's still available. I do think he's owned in about half the leagues on Sleeper, though. But if he's still out there, definitely go put a claim on him. I think as we get further and further into the season, we're going to see Spears take over this backfield from Pollard. And I kind of think it already happened this week, although it didn't show up entirely in the box score. So Pollard's not going to completely go away, but the 10 carries to Spears 5, I could see that switching, and Spears being out there so much more when the Titans are losing, I think is something that we can't understate. Like this is a bad team, and Pollard's getting older too, and it's like Spears is their up and coming running back, and it feels like they might even just turn the keys over to him as he gets healthier. And they saw him at the end of last year perform really well when Pollard was out. And so I think that Spears is somebody that's very good to add to your rosters. Next waiver claim here is Bam Knight. So we got news right before kickoff that he was going to start and Michael Carter was going to back him up. And that immediately was not true. Michael Carter was the starter, but we did see Knight get a lot more work than we were maybe expecting. So I think the report was Kind of true. I mean, he worked significantly on early downs. He had the most snaps, but Michael Carter still split work pretty evenly with him. And, 9 carries. Michael Carter had 5 targets as well, only 2 receptions, but he was much more heavily targeted than Bam Knight. And obviously, you see here, Knight scored the touchdown. He was in on the 1-yard score. Last week, that was Carter. So this is just a pretty messy situation at this point now. I was really hopeful after last week when Michael Carter had 23 touches that this was going to just be Carter's gig, and it was going to be really good to have him as a fantasy player for your teams. But now it's just so muddied. I'm not sure you want any of these guys. So, if Knight is out there, you want to add him, but definitely don't go crazy on Fab. Even in 12-team leagues where like nothing really comes along very often, if he's out there, don't be dropping like 20% of your Fab. It's not worth it because we just don't know what his role is going to be. He's not super involved as a pass catcher, so he's going to be super touchdown reliant if you even need him. And, Benson, IR, but he should be back. So this isn't even somebody that's going to carry value all the way to the end of the year. So a couple dollars, if you really are hurting, you want him maybe $5-6, that type of bid. But overall, if you have Michael Carter too, I wouldn't be cutting Michael Carter, despite the fact that Knight is more involved here. I definitely still think that Carter has a role, and that seeing 5 targets is not something you can just ignore either. So he was still out there a lot, and depending on how they want to break this down, I don't know that we're going to get a ton of info from week to week, but I think you kind of just have to own both of these guys until you figure out or until any sort of consistency develops. And also, I threw up the DeMarcado on the snap share. He only played 3 snaps. He's completely out of the rotation, so you can safely cut Amari. Next waiver target and huge role change, in my opinion, is Kendrick Bourne. So we saw him with no other game in town last week, obviously go off. He had 10 for 142. And then this week, he was still the featured part of the offense, even with Juwan Jennings active. Now, Jennings, I don't think, was fully healthy. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to tell because he played the same number of snaps as Bourne did. They both had 55 and 53. So basically the same number of snaps. They basically ran the same number of routes. It was just Mac Jones, I guess, had developed that rapport with Bourne, and Bourne just kept riding with it. I mean, he had a 56-yard catch where he went across the field, just had a ton of yards after catch as well on that reception. 9 targets, led the team. Obviously, McCaffrey is always going to be heavily involved, but it just is one of those things where I'm wondering out loud, basically, if while Mac Jones is the starter, is Kendrick Bourne just going to be the receiver that you want to own? Obviously, Pearsall's still dealing with that PCL injury in his knee. I don't know that we're going to see him next week, maybe the week after, because they did say that he's not going to go on injured reserve, and if he missed 2 weeks, that would be 4 total. So I don't know why they wouldn't have put him on injured reserve. So maybe we see him in week 8, but going into this next week, I mean, if you need receiver help, you need a starter. Bourne is absolutely the guy that you want. If Mac Jones is still starting, Kendrick Bourne is still out there, pick him up, and you can start him with confidence this coming. And the last guy we're going to talk about here for the waiver wire is Tez Johnson. So you see he had 1 for 45 and a touchdown. He absolutely ran down a bomb from Baker Mayfield too. This was not a screen pass or anything like that. He caught it all 45 yards into the end zone, ran it down, outstretched arms. It was a great reception. The knock on him coming into the league here was that he didn't have the speed that he displayed at Oregon, and obviously on that play it looked like the speed played. Overall, only 1 reception. So you're probably wondering what's going on here. What about Cameron Johnson? What about Sterling Shepard? And I put the snaps up there to show you that Tez Johnson is the one that stepped in when Ibuka went down, right? So Ibuka still played 28 snaps, but Cameron Johnson only had 26. Sterling Shepard only had 26, but Tez Johnson had 38. He was out there a lot. And so Matt and I both like Tez Johnson as a talent. And I'm just hopeful that he can kind of step up into a little bit more targets than 3 this week. If he gets 6 or 7, I could see him putting together a pretty productive game with Baker playing as well as he is. I will say that the most likely guy to step up if all of these receivers are going to miss is Cade Otton. I would expect his role to expand. He led the team in targets this week, and I would expect that even expands further. So, if you need tight end help, Cade Otton is another good waiver wire claim, but Tez Johnson is somebody that I'd be looking to claim before. If you have Ibuka and you're looking around and there's just nothing there, Tez Johnson, I think, is your guys. All right. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. Look forward to talking in the next one.